That evidence was sealed 3 hours before you arrested me. Danielle Brooks said it quietly, but the sentence struck the courtroom harder than a shout. Detective Ryan Mercer stopped with one hand resting on the witness stand. Across the aisle, Officer Caleb Dunn lowered his eyes for half a second, then forced them back toward the jury. The clear evidence bag sat beneath the fluorescent lights, its white label bright against the dark wood table. Inside was a small packet Mercer claimed had been taken from Danielle's coat less than an hour earlier. The jurors leaned forward. The court reporter's fingers paused above the keys. Even Judge Margaret Hale looked up from her notes. Danielle stood beside her appointed attorney with her wrist secured in front of her, the short chain cold against her skin. She did not look frightened. She looked at the handwritten time on the seal. Then she looked at Mercer. "Would you like to explain that, Detective?" Mercer's smile returned slowly, polished by 20 years of being believed. "The defendant is confused," he said. "People become confused when the truth catches up with them." A few heads turned toward Danielle, searching her face for panic. They found none. What no one in that courtroom knew was that Danielle had spent 14 months waiting for this exact moment. What Mercer did not know was that the button on her coat had recorded every second before the hearing began. And what neither man understood was that someone inside the courthouse had just disabled the security camera watching the evidence corridor. If stories about courage, truth, and justice matter to you, subscribe now, because what happened next would expose far more than two dishonest officers. 30 minutes earlier, Caleb Dunn had guided Danielle through a narrow hallway behind courtroom 4, keeping one hand near her elbow as if she might run. The corridor smelled of floor wax, old paper, and burnt coffee drifting from the clerk's office. Danielle counted 4 doors, 2 cameras, and 1 emergency exit. She had memorized the building months ago, but today something was different. The camera above the evidence room had no red light. Caleb stopped beside a metal bench and told her to face the wall while he checked her restraints. His movements were quick, practiced, hidden from the deputy standing 20 feet away. Danielle felt the weight enter her coat pocket. She gave no sign that she noticed. No flinch. No sharp breath. Nothing. Caleb leaned closer and murmured, "By noon, nobody will care what you say happened." Danielle kept her eyes on the pale cinderblock wall. A hairline crack ran from the ceiling to the baseboard like a black thread. "You seem very sure," she replied. "I am." He stepped away, satisfied. Now, inside the courtroom, Mercer lifted the evidence bag for the jury to see. This was recovered directly from the defendant, he declared. Danielle watched Caleb's thumb press against the edge of his badge. Once. Twice. A nervous habit. Her attorney, Elena Torres, whispered for her to stay silent, but Danielle's attention had shifted to the back row, where Deputy District Attorney Thomas Vance sat alone in a charcoal suit. He was not assigned to the case. His name appeared nowhere in her FBI files. Yet when she mentioned the incorrect seal time, Vance did not look at the evidence. He looked toward Caleb. That glance lasted less than a second. It was enough. Danielle finally understood why Mercer had never been afraid of an investigation. He believed someone inside the courthouse was protecting him. Judge Hale raised her gavel. "Ms. Brooks, you will speak only through counsel." Danielle slowly sat down. The chain between her wrists tightened as she folded her hands. Mercer relaxed, mistaking obedience for defeat. Then Vance reached for his phone beneath the table, and Danielle saw 3 words appear on the illuminated screen before he turned it face down: "Move the witness." Danielle kept her eyes on Thomas Vance while the judge spoke, but her mind moved backward through 14 months of patient work. She had entered the investigation under the name Danielle Reed, posing as a records consultant hired by the city to review evidence storage procedures. The role was deliberately ordinary. It gave her access to intake logs, transfer sheets, camera schedules, and the quiet spaces where people became careless. At first, the irregularities looked small. A missing signature. A corrected timestamp. A sealed bag logged before an arrest had officially occurred. Then the pattern widened. Cash disappeared from property rooms. Complaints against certain officers were reassigned and quietly closed. Defendants who challenged the report suddenly faced additional charges. Every trail curved back toward Ryan Mercer and Caleb Dunn, but never far enough to prove who protected them. Danielle learned to move slowly. She listened more than she spoke. She wore plain coats, carried cheap pens, and let people assume she was unimportant. Mercer had passed her in hallways without remembering her face. Caleb once asked her to refill the copier paper while he discussed a witness statement on the phone. Neither man understood that invisibility was the strongest cover they could have given her. Her federal team had collected bank records, altered reports, and testimony from families whose cases had collapsed under suspicious evidence. Still, the investigation lacked one thing: proof that the officers were creating evidence in real time and coordinating with someone inside the courthouse. That was why Danielle had accepted the risk of being arrested. 3 nights earlier, she had parked near a closed convenience store in West Baltimore after receiving a message from a confidential source. Mercer's cruiser arrived within 7 minutes. Caleb searched her car without waiting for consent. They found nothing. Mercer's expression had tightened, not with surprise, but irritation. Then he ordered her taken in anyway. Danielle could have ended the operation with a single phrase known only to federal agents. She did not. She needed them confident. She needed them to believe she was alone. Now, seated beneath the cold courtroom lights, she watched confidence settle over Mercer's shoulders like a tailored coat. Elena Torres leaned close and whispered, "You need to tell me how you knew about that seal." Danielle turned slightly. Elena was 34, sharp-eyed, exhausted, and carrying 6 case folders in a canvas bag worn thin at the handles. She had met Danielle only that morning, yet she had already challenged the prosecutor twice over missing paperwork. Danielle respected her immediately, which made the deception harder. "I read the label," Danielle whispered. Elena frowned. "Most defendants do not know what those numbers mean. Most defendants have not spent months studying evidence logs." Before Elena could ask more, a side door opened. 2 deputies escorted a young man into the courtroom. Marcus Hill looked no older than 19. His county-issued shirt hung loosely from his shoulders, and his eyes searched the room with the stunned caution of someone who had stopped expecting help. Danielle recognized him from a file on her desk. Arrested 6 weeks earlier. Firearm allegedly found beneath the passenger seat. Body camera unavailable. Evidence entered by Caleb Dunn. Marcus looked at Mercer, then at Vance, and all color drained from his face. Vance placed his phone inside his jacket and stood. "Your Honor," he said, smooth and prepared, "the state is ready to call its next witness." Danielle felt the chain between her wrists shift as her hands tightened. The witness Vance wanted moved had not been taken out of the building. He had just been brought into the room. Marcus Hill took the witness chair beneath a ceiling fan that turned with a faint mechanical hum. The clerk asked him to state his name, and his answer came out so softly that she made him repeat it. Thomas Vance approached with a yellow legal pad tucked beneath one arm, every step measured, every expression calm. He greeted Marcus as though they had never met. Danielle watched the young man's fingers curl around the edge of the chair. His fear was not directed at the courtroom. It was directed at Mercer. "Mr. Hill," Vance began, "did you see the defendant selling illegal substances near West Lexington Street on Tuesday night?" Marcus looked at Danielle for the first time. His eyes held an apology before his mouth formed a word. "Yes, sir." The lie fell into the room and seemed to remain there, too heavy to move. Mercer leaned back with quiet satisfaction. Caleb stared straight ahead, but his thumb touched his badge again. Once. Twice. Danielle counted the motion. Elena rose. Objection. The state provided no notice that this witness would testify. Judge Hale looked toward Vance. Why was Mr. Hill not included on the witness list? Vance did not hesitate. He came forward this morning with information relevant to the arrest. Danielle knew that was impossible. Marcus had been held in county custody for 6 weeks. He had not come forward. He had been brought forward. Judge Hale allowed the testimony to continue but warned Vance to establish a clear foundation. The warning sounded firm, yet Danielle noticed something beneath it. The judge was irritated, not surprised. Vance moved closer to Marcus. "Tell the court what you observed." Marcus swallowed. "I saw her beside a dark sedan. A man walked up. She gave him something. What did she give him? A small bag. And what did he give her? Marcus paused. Mercer shifted in his seat. The leather beneath him gave a quiet creak. Cash, Marcus said. Vance turned toward the jury. No further questions. Elena stood, but Danielle touched her sleeve before she could step forward. Ask him where the police found the gun, Danielle whispered. Elena looked at her sharply. What gun? The one in his case. Ask about the evidence label. Elena's face tightened. How do you know about his case? Please. There was no time for a fuller answer. Elena approached the witness stand. Mr. Hill, are you currently facing charges of your own? Vance objected immediately. Judge Hale allowed the question. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. Those charges involve a firearm allegedly recovered from a vehicle. Marcus glanced at Mercer again. Yes. Where was that firearm found? Under the passenger seat. Elena lifted the evidence packet from Danielle's case. Do you remember the color of the seal placed on the evidence bag? Marcus hesitated. White with a blue stripe. The room grew quieter. Danielle's bag had the same uncommon seal. Elena looked down at the printed identification number, then back at Marcus. Do you remember any part of the number? Vance stepped forward. Objection. This has no relevance. It has every relevance, Elena said. For the first time that morning, her voice carried more anger than fatigue. Judge Hale studied Marcus. Answer if you remember. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. 4792. Elena turned the bag toward the bench. The final 4 digits were 4792. A murmur traveled through the gallery. Mercer's confidence vanished for only an instant, but Danielle saw it. Vance saw it too. He asked the judge to clear the courtroom and seal both records. That request revealed more than panic. It revealed knowledge. Danielle leaned toward Elena. Do not let them remove Marcus. Before Elena could respond, Caleb rose and moved toward the witness chair. Marcus recoiled as though the room had suddenly lost all its air. Danielle stood. The chain between her wrists struck the wooden table with a sharp metallic sound. Your Honor, she said, if that witness leaves with Officer Dunn, the truth leaves with him. Judge Hale's gavel struck once, and the murmur died immediately. Officer Dunn, step away from the witness. Caleb stopped beside Marcus, his hand still resting near the back of the chair. For the first time, the judge looked directly at him instead of through him. Now. Caleb moved back 2 steps. Marcus released a breath so slowly that only Danielle seemed to notice. Thomas Vance adjusted his cuff and recovered his courtroom smile. Your Honor, the defendant is attempting to disrupt these proceedings with unsupported accusations. Danielle remained standing. The metal chain between her wrists lay against the table, bright beneath the overhead lights. Then compare the intake records, she said. 2 cases, 6 weeks apart, carrying the same evidence number. That is not an accusation. It is a clerical impossibility. Vance turned toward her with practiced impatience. You are not an attorney. No, Danielle replied. But numbers do not need a law degree to match. A few jurors exchanged glances. Elena rose beside her, no longer trying to pull her down. The defense requests immediate production of the full chain of custody for both items, including entry times, transfer signatures, storage locations, and body camera records. Vance answered before the judge could. Those documents are not available in this courtroom. Danielle watched his face. He had spoken too quickly. Elena heard it too. How would you know that? She asked. Silence settled over the room. Vance glanced at Mercer, then toward the clerk's desk. It was brief, but Danielle saw the clerk lower her eyes. Another connection. Another thread. Judge Hale ordered a 15-minute recess and instructed the bailiff to secure both evidence bags inside the courtroom safe. No officer connected to either case would be allowed to touch them. Mercer stood at once. Your Honor, standard procedure requires law enforcement custody. Standard procedure created this problem, Judge Hale said. Her voice was even, but the temperature in the room seemed to fall. Mercer's jaw tightened. He sat down. The jury filed out through the side door. Spectators rose and whispered among themselves. Danielle remained beside Elena while Caleb escorted Marcus toward the holding corridor under the bailiff's supervision. As he passed, Marcus looked at her. His expression carried fear, confusion, and the fragile beginning of hope. Danielle gave him a single nod. Stay calm. Stay visible. Elena waited until the room had nearly emptied before turning on her. Who are you? She asked quietly. Danielle looked toward the courthouse camera above the rear doors. Its indicator was still dark. Someone who knows these records were altered. That is not an answer. It is the only one I can give you right now. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. You knew Marcus's charge. You knew the storage system. You recognized the seal before anyone else. Either you are connected to this operation, or you have been investigating it. Danielle said nothing. The silence confirmed enough. Elena's anger softened into alarm. Are we in danger? Before Danielle could respond, the side door opened. Thomas Vance entered alone and closed it behind him. The courtroom was almost empty now. Judge Hale had gone to chambers. Mercer and Caleb were in the corridor. Only the court reporter remained, packing her equipment 20 feet away. Vance approached the defense table with a folder in one hand. Ms. Torres, he said, the state is prepared to offer an immediate resolution. Elena did not reach for the folder. During recess. Your client pleads guilty to possession, and Marcus Hill receives a reduced sentence with time served. Danielle studied him. The offer was too generous for a prosecutor who believed his case was strong. It was not a deal. It was an attempt to close two files before anyone compared them. What happens to the evidence? Danielle asked. Vance's gaze settled on her with new attention. Once the plea is entered, the court retains it according to standard policy. And the records? Sealed. Including the recordings. The question left Danielle softly. Vance's expression did not change, but his fingers tightened around the folder. Any recording connected to this case becomes protected material. Elena looked between them. Danielle felt the final piece move into place. Vance did not merely know that records existed. He knew about a recording no one had mentioned. Then the dark camera above the rear doors blinked once, and its red light returned. The red light above the courtroom doors remained steady, but Danielle did not trust it. A camera could be active and still send its feed to the wrong hands. Thomas Vance placed the plea agreement on the table between them, aligning it carefully with the edge as though neat paper could make a corrupt choice look lawful. This offer expires when court resumes, he said. Elena opened the folder but did not touch the pen clipped inside. You are asking my client to admit to evidence that may have been fabricated. Vance's eyes stayed on Danielle. I am offering certainty. For whom? Danielle asked. His smile thinned. Before he could answer, the rear door opened and Ryan Mercer entered with Caleb Dunn behind him. Mercer carried the confidence he had worn all morning, but it no longer fit him cleanly. His attention moved from the restored camera light to the unsigned agreement, then to Vance. Caleb remained near the door, rubbing his thumb against his badge. Once. Twice. 3 times. Vance closed the folder. We were discussing a resolution. Mercer looked at Danielle. There is nothing to discuss. She goes into custody, and the witness goes back downstairs. Elena stepped between him and the table. Judge Hale ordered that neither of you approach the evidence or Marcus Hill. I am aware of the order, Mercer replied. Then follow it. The words surprised even Elena. The court reporter stopped packing and watched from across the room. Mercer lowered his voice. Counselor, you have known this woman for less than a day. Do not ruin your career for someone who has not told you the truth. Danielle felt the warning land exactly where Mercer intended. Elena's shoulders stiffened, but she did not move. Vance glanced toward the court reporter. We should continue this privately. No, Danielle said. The single word held the room. She turned toward the restored camera. Everything from this point forward stays visible. Mercer gave a short laugh. You think a camera makes you important? Danielle met his eyes. I think people behave differently when they know someone might remember. The laugh disappeared. A bailiff entered from the side corridor and announced that Judge Hale would return in 5 minutes. Behind him, Marcus stood near the holding room entrance with another deputy. He looked toward Danielle, then lowered his gaze to the floor. Mercer followed that glance. His expression changed, not much, but enough. Move him, he told Caleb. The bailiff raised a hand. The judge ordered him held here. This is a police matter. Not inside my courtroom. Caleb hesitated. That hesitation fractured the unity between the officers for the first time. Mercer turned on him. Do it. Caleb took one step toward Marcus, then stopped when Elena spoke. Officer Dunn, before you move anyone, I need you to answer one question on the record. Caleb looked at Vance. Vance said nothing. Elena lifted the evidence packet and pointed to the duplicate number. Did you personally enter this item into storage? That is not appropriate during recess, Vance said. Neither is offering a plea while evidence is under challenge, Elena replied. The court reporter quietly set her equipment back on the table. Her fingers returned to the keys. Caleb stared at the evidence bag as though seeing it for the first time. Mercer moved closer to him. Do not answer. Danielle watched Caleb's face. Fear was replacing loyalty. He knew Mercer could abandon him. He also knew Vance had offered protection only while the system remained quiet. Now the camera was on, the court reporter was recording, and Marcus was still in the room. Danielle leaned forward slightly. You were told nobody would question the number, she said. Caleb's breathing changed. Mercer's voice hardened. She is manipulating you. Then let him deny it, Danielle replied. Judge Hale's chamber door opened. Everyone turned except Caleb. He was still looking at the bag. When the judge reached the bench, he finally raised his eyes. Your Honor, he said, his voice unsteady but clear, I need an attorney. The courtroom seemed to contract around Caleb's words. Judge Hale lowered herself into her chair without looking away from him. Officer Dunn, are you invoking your right to counsel? Caleb swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Mercer turned toward him so sharply that the movement drew every eye in the room. You do not need a lawyer, he said. Judge Hale's expression hardened. Detective Mercer, you will not advise a witness from the floor of my courtroom. Vance stepped forward, calm returning to his voice by force. Your Honor, Officer Dunn is under considerable stress. A brief recess would allow everyone to regain perspective. Danielle heard the choice hidden inside the request. Remove Caleb. Separate him from the record. Give Mercer time to repair the fracture. Judge Hale looked toward the court reporter, then the sealed evidence, then Marcus waiting near the side corridor. The court will take 20 minutes, she said. Officer Dunn will remain under the supervision of courthouse security and will have no contact with Detective Mercer or Mr. Vance. Mercer's face became still. That stillness concerned Danielle more than anger would have. The bailiff approached Caleb and guided him through the side door. Marcus was taken in the opposite direction. As the courtroom emptied, Danielle felt the tight pull of the chain between her wrists. Elena gathered her papers quickly. This is falling apart, she whispered. For them, Danielle said. Not yet. 2 deputies escorted Danielle downstairs to a holding room beneath the courthouse. The air smelled of damp concrete and industrial cleaner. A narrow window near the ceiling admitted a strip of gray light. Somewhere behind the wall, water fell from a leaking pipe at regular intervals. One drop. Then another. Danielle sat on a steel bench and listened to the silence between them. The recording device inside her coat button had less than 10% power remaining. Her federal team had been instructed to wait for a verbal confirmation linking Vance to the evidence operation. He had nearly given it, but nearly would not hold up in court. If she activated the emergency signal now, agents would enter, secure Mercer, separate Caleb, and protect Marcus. They might also lose Vance. He could claim he had discussed recordings in a general legal sense. He could deny knowledge of the planted evidence. He could walk away and rebuild the same machine somewhere else. Danielle pressed her wrists together, feeling the cold edge of the restraints. 14 months of work rested on a battery smaller than a coin and the possibility that a frightened officer might choose truth over protection. From the neighboring room came the faint scrape of shoes. Then Marcus spoke through the wall. "Miss Brooks." Danielle turned her head. "I am here. Are they going to send me somewhere else?" His voice was careful, as though fear itself might be overheard. "The judge ordered you to remain in the building." "That is not what I asked." Danielle closed her eyes. Water struck the floor again. She pictured the photograph in Marcus's file, taken before his arrest. He had been wearing a grocery store apron and standing beside his younger sister at her high school graduation. He was not part of the operation. He was a young man they had chosen because they expected no one important to defend him. "Are they going to make me disappear too?" he asked. Danielle looked down at the dark button on her coat. One signal would end the risk. It would also leave the person above Mercer untouched. She had spent 14 months learning how to wait, how to remain invisible, how to let cruel people reveal themselves. But patience became cowardice when someone else paid the price. She leaned closer to the wall. "Not today," she said. Then she pressed the button once, not long enough to summon the team, but long enough to transmit a priority warning. Upstairs, the courthouse doors would quietly lock. Federal agents would move into position without entering the courtroom. Danielle had not ended the operation. She had changed its rules. Footsteps approached outside. The lock turned, and Thomas Vance appeared in the doorway carrying the unsigned plea agreement. "You have one final opportunity," he said. Danielle rose slowly. "So do you." Thomas Vance stepped inside and closed the holding room door with deliberate care. The unsigned plea agreement rested beneath his arm, its pages perfectly aligned, its blue ink signature line waiting like a trap dressed as mercy. Danielle remained standing beside the steel bench. The narrow strip of daylight near the ceiling had faded, leaving the room under the pale buzz of a fluorescent fixture. "You sign," Vance said. "Marcus walks out with time served. You refuse, and both of you go back upstairs to face the evidence already on record." Danielle studied him without answering. His tie was still straight. His voice was still controlled. Only the shine of perspiration near his temple betrayed how quickly the morning had turned against him. "Why are you offering this to me yourself?" she asked. "Because your attorney is emotional. Elena Torres is careful. She is inexperienced. She found your duplicate evidence number in less than 10 minutes. Vance's mouth tightened. He placed the folder on the bench and opened it to the final page. "You think this is about a number? It is about containment. Courts run on agreements. Cases end because people accept reality." Danielle looked at the pen. "Whose reality?" Vance lowered his voice. "The one that keeps people from losing everything over a misunderstanding." The recording device inside her button gave no sound, but Danielle imagined the battery draining with every second. She needed him to say more. She needed knowledge, intent, and control in the same sentence. "Mercer planted the packet," she said. "Caleb entered it under a number already used in Marcus Hill's case. You knew the records would be sealed after a plea." Vance did not deny it. He only glanced toward the door. "Once you sign, every recording connected to your arrest becomes protected material under the authority of this court." Danielle held his gaze. "Every recording. Do not play games with me. No one has entered a recording into evidence." The silence sharpened. Vance realized the mistake one heartbeat too late. Danielle stepped closer to the bench. "How did you know there was one?" He reached for the folder, but she placed her restrained hands over it first. The chain gave a soft metallic click. "You have been recording officers without authorization," he said. "That device belongs to this court now." "What device?" His composure broke at the edges. "The one in your coat." Danielle slowly looked down at the dark button near her collar. When she raised her eyes again, Vance understood. He had not identified a possibility. He had identified the exact location. Footsteps sounded in the corridor, steady and approaching. Vance moved toward the door, but it opened before he reached it. Elena entered with Judge Hale's bailiff and a man Danielle knew as Assistant United States Attorney Daniel Reed. Reed wore a gray suit and carried no folder. He did not need one. Vance stopped. "This is a private conference," he said. Reed looked at Danielle first. She gave him a small nod. The warning signal had been received. "It is not private anymore," Reed replied. They returned to the courtroom 5 minutes later. Mercer sat at the prosecution table, unaware that federal agents had taken positions beyond every exit. Caleb was absent, speaking with appointed counsel in a secured room. Marcus remained beside a courthouse deputy, his face pale but alert. Judge Hale called the hearing back to order. Vance placed the plea agreement before Danielle and announced that she had accepted the state's offer. Elena rose immediately. "She has accepted nothing." Vance turned toward Danielle. "Sign it." Mercer smiled from across the aisle. Danielle picked up the pen. The room held its breath as she lowered the tip toward the paper. Then she set the pen down, reached for the top button of her coat, and twisted it free. She placed the tiny device beside the agreement. "The recording is complete," she said. Mercer's smile disappeared. Daniel Reed walked into the center aisle and presented his credentials to the judge. "Your Honor, Danielle Brooks is a federal agent assigned to an active public corruption investigation." No one moved. Reed turned toward Vance. "And the statement he made downstairs just established that he knew about the surveillance device, the planted evidence, and the plan to seal both records." The rear courtroom doors opened. Federal agents entered without noise or urgency. Vance stared at Danielle as though the woman in front of him had changed, but she had not changed at all. For the first time, he was simply being forced to see her clearly. For several seconds, the courtroom held only the faint hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic beyond the tall windows. Then everything moved at once. Federal agents took positions near Mercer and Vance while another agent secured the evidence bags from the courtroom safe. Judge Hale ordered the jury removed and directed the clerk to preserve every page, recording, and digital entry connected to both cases. Mercer stood slowly, his confidence reduced to something brittle. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "I followed procedure." Danielle looked at him across the aisle. The restraints had been removed from her wrists, but the pale marks remained. "You did not misunderstand me," she said. "You decided no one would question you if you called me a criminal." Mercer opened his mouth, but no answer came. Near the side door, Caleb entered with his court-appointed attorney. He looked smaller without Mercer beside him. His badge had been placed inside a clear evidence envelope. Daniel Reed asked Judge Hale for permission to address the court. "Officer Dunn has agreed to provide a complete statement," he said. "That statement includes evidence tampering, false reports, witness coercion, and instructions received from Detective Mercer and Deputy District Attorney Vance." Vance turned toward Caleb with disbelief. "You have no idea what you are doing." Caleb did not look at him. "I know exactly what I did," he said quietly. "That is why I asked for a lawyer." The words carried no triumph, only shame. Danielle watched him and felt no satisfaction. Accountability was not revenge. It was the first honest thing that had happened in that room all morning. Reed placed a thick file on the defense table. Inside were photographs, intake records, bank transfers, deleted complaints, and 17 names. 17 people whose cases had depended on evidence handled by Mercer or Caleb. 17 families who had been told the system had no reason to believe them. Danielle opened the file and turned it toward Judge Hale. "Marcus Hill is number 18, she said. Marcus stood near the deputy, uncertain whether he was allowed to move. Judge Hale removed her glasses and studied the duplicate evidence labels again. Her face changed as the full weight of the record settled over her. "All charges against Ms. Brooks are dismissed immediately," she said. "Mr. Hill will be released pending emergency review of his case. Every conviction connected to these officers will be referred for independent examination." Marcus stared at her as though the words had arrived in a language he had forgotten how to understand. The deputy unlocked his restraints. The soft click traveled through the silent courtroom. Marcus rubbed his wrists, then looked at Danielle. "You knew I was telling the truth?" he asked. "I knew they expected your fear to sound like guilt," she replied. Elena Torres stood beside them, still holding the yellow legal pad she had carried into court that morning. "You could have told me who you were," she said. Danielle gave her a tired smile. "I needed you to defend the woman they said I was, not the badge I carried." Elena looked down for a moment, then nodded. Across the room, Vance tried to speak over Reed, arguing that Danielle had manipulated the process and created the appearance of corruption. Danielle did not interrupt him. She simply removed a second folder from Reed's file and placed it on the table. It contained the names and case numbers of every person whose life had been reduced to a statistic. "This investigation was never built to destroy you," she said. "It was built to return names to the people you turned into numbers." No one answered. Outside, the gray sky began to brighten, and a thin line of sunlight crossed the courtroom floor, reaching the place where Marcus stood without restraints for the first time in 6 weeks. 3 weeks later, Danielle Brooks returned to the courthouse through the same side entrance where Caleb Dunn had slipped the false evidence into her coat. The hallway had not changed. The walls were still pale cinder block. The air still carried the scent of floor wax, old paper, and coffee. But the camera above the evidence corridor now showed a steady red light, and beneath it hung a temporary federal seal. Ryan Mercer and Thomas Vance had been formally charged with conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction, and violations of civil rights. Caleb was cooperating with investigators, and his testimony had opened cases in 2 neighboring counties. 17 convictions were under review. 4 people had already been released. Marcus Hill was the 5th. Danielle found him outside courtroom 4 wearing a Navy grocery store jacket and holding his younger sister's graduation photograph inside a clear protective sleeve. He looked older than 19 now, though only a few weeks had passed. "They gave my job back," he said. "My manager said I can start Monday." Danielle smiled. "That sounds like a good Monday." Marcus glanced through the courtroom doors. Elena Torres stood inside with a group of attorneys reviewing stacks of reopened cases. Judge Hale had ordered an independent audit of every matter touched by Mercer's unit, including cases she had once accepted without question. She had not tried to excuse her failure. She had placed it on the public record. "I relied on authority when I should have demanded proof," she had said. It was not enough to repair every life, but it was a beginning built from truth instead of pride. Marcus looked at Danielle's coat. The recording button was gone. In its place was an ordinary black button, slightly brighter than the others. "Do you still have the badge?" he asked. Danielle reached into her pocket and showed him the gold shield for only a moment. "I do." "Why did you let them put you in handcuffs when you had that?" Danielle looked through the open doorway at the defense table where she had sat beneath accusation. "Because a badge can make people listen," she said. "But I needed the truth to stand even when they thought I had no power." Marcus considered that quietly. Then he nodded and walked toward Elena, carrying the photograph against his chest. Danielle continued downstairs to the evidence archive. The room was cool and nearly silent, filled with rows of metal shelves under white lights. On a central table rested 2 sealed bags. One contained the handcuffs removed from Danielle's wrists. The other contained her federal badge, temporarily logged as part of the investigation. One object had made the courtroom see a suspect. The other would have made it see authority. Danielle touched neither. Instead, she opened Marcus Hill's file, turned to the final page, and pressed a stamp into black ink. The words appeared across the paper in firm capital letters, "Conviction vacated." The sound echoed once through the archive. She closed the folder and placed it with the other restored cases. Outside the narrow window, morning sunlight moved across the brick courthouse wall, warming a building that had felt cold for too long. Justice had not arrived because the right person carried a badge. It arrived because frightened people finally spoke. One attorney chose duty over convenience, one judge admitted error, and one woman refused to let silence protect cruelty. Danielle picked up the next file. There were still names waiting to be returned. And as the sunlight reached the edge of the table, one question remained for everyone who would hear their story. When authority tells you to look away, would you protect your own safety, or would you stand beside the person no one else believes?